I've taught hundreds, if not thousands, of English language students. And one thing I've seen over and over again is that students waste time when it comes to studying vocabulary. So if you've seen this channel in the past or you've checked out some of our videos, you may already know that there are lots of things that I think are bad habits. So for example, word lists are actually a really bad habit. It's something that feels easy and maybe even feels productive, but doesn't really make an impact to your vocabulary or your score in the IELTS exam. So I've made lots of videos about things that I think don't work, but what I want to do today is share with you what does work. And actually I'm going to share 4 things that I think will help you make a big difference in a short amount of time when it comes to IELTS vocabulary. So if you want to improve your English without spending any more time studying English, this tip is for you. Now that may sound impossible, and often when I introduce this to students, they go, oh my goodness, that's not true, that's not going to work. And then they see a massive difference. So the tip is to simply spend time doing things you'd normally do in your mother tongue and do them in English instead. So for me, for example, I love watching TV after a long day at work. And so when I was learning to speak Korean, I knew there were lots and lots of really good Korean TV shows. So what I did was, instead of watching TV in English, I watched Korean television instead. And I watched lots of K-dramas and they were really, really good. I had to put subtitles on, but I still picked up a lot of language from simply making that switch. Now, if your language level is a little bit higher, you might not want to use subtitles, but however you do it, anything along these lines is going to make a huge difference to you. Now, when I was working as a lecturer in a university in the English language teaching department, I got all of my students to make this change for at least half an hour a week. And here's what happened. Some of those students started watching TV in English, like I did with Korean. I also had some students who started joining English language servers of the video games they enjoyed playing. I had some students who watched football matches with English commentary instead of Mandarin commentary. So there were lots of different ways to apply this. But what all of those students said was, first, that it was a really enjoyable way to add more English to their diet, and second, that it made a huge amount of difference to their vocabulary, and actually it also improved their fluency because they were listening to things all the time, their listening skills improved, and if you do something which involves reading, maybe your reading skills will improve. But the key thing here is this is something you can do without taking more time out of your week. So if you're a busy student, this is for you. And even if you're not a particularly busy student, why waste more time than you have to studying English, right? So this is something I recommend absolutely everyone to do. Find something you enjoy doing and simply do that thing in English instead. The other thing that's really useful about this, especially for the IELTS exam, is that in the IELTS exam, you're very likely to be asked about things you're interested in. So in the speaking test, for example, if they ask you about sports, they'll often ask you about what sports you like. So for example, my students who were watching basketball in English, well, they knew all of the basketball vocabulary in English. And so when it came to testing those students for their practice exams, they were all saying things like buzzer beater and 3 points and throwing all these bits of language out there. And this is really good language that can really help you in the IELTS exam. So this isn't just good for fluency and general confidence. This can actually really help you improve specific bits of vocabulary that you will actually need in the IELTS exam. And because they ask you about your interests so much, this can be a huge help for you. The second tip is to start taking notes of any new language you notice. And this one is very based in kind of psychology and applied linguistics and studying how people learn languages. Now, when you're learning something, if you want it to be memorable, something you can do is study it in what we call a multimodal way. And so multi means many, and mode is something like reading, writing, listening, or speaking. And so multimodal just means you're doing something in multiple different ways. So for example, if you listen to some new vocabulary and then you write it down, that will be multimodal. By making those notes, it will actually help it stick in your memory. The other nice thing about this is you have a nice long list of all the words you've written. You can come back to it and read it over and over again. So this will really motivate you. It will help you feel like you're learning something because you'll have all those words. And it will also kind of be a reminder for the future, which is a really nice thing to have. Now, when you do this, I actually recommend you write down words as phrases rather than just individual words. So even if you know all the other words in that phrase, writing down the sentence or maybe a little bit more can be a huge help, because if you only learn words on their own, you won't necessarily remember how to learn them. So do try and write down the whole thing if you have time to do that. This third tip is to use real IELTS samples to study for the IELTS exam. Now, this might sound a little bit obvious, but it's absolutely true. If you want to learn the kind of vocabulary that's going to help you get an IELTS Band 9, then the best way to find that is to look at Band 9 essays or listen to Band 9 answers. So we have a bunch of resources like this on our website. There are also lots of other websites. There are books and other resources where you can find these. Wherever you get them, it doesn't matter too much as long as the quality is high. Now, do be aware there are also some bad materials out there that use weird questions. Maybe the vocabulary is bad. I've seen some Band 9 answers that make all sorts of grammar and vocabulary mistakes. So find something with a high quality and use that for your IELTS study. Now, this also has the advantage over a word list that you're going to see these words in context, which means you're going to see them how they're used in real life. So it's fairly common for me when I see students work to kind of see a word that's a good word used in the wrong place. And so by learning words kind of through exposure in real IELTS essays, you'll be able to see how they're used for real, and you'll remember how they're used for real. And when it comes to be your turn to use those words, you're far more likely to use them appropriately. Now, my final tip for improving your IELTS vocabulary is to work with someone else. Now, this might sound like I'm trying to sell you our services, and we do have those services, but I also know that students who work with other students to help improve their own vocabulary can make a massive amount of progress too. Now, think about it. Even if one of your friends who you're working with doesn't have as good an English level as you, that's not going to take the same form in every situation. So they're always going to know words that you don't know, even if there's a bit of a disparity between your English levels. The other advantage of this, even if your level is higher, is that teaching people can actually improve your English as well and your skills as well. And I actually find a lot of the time that when I teach things to people, I learn a lot from that process as well. So you can work with a friend, that's really beneficial. Of course, it's best to work with a trained English teacher. I would definitely recommend finding someone who's trained specifically in the IELTS exam, because there are lots of kind of quirks and differences to the IELTS that make it quite different to regular English. So find someone you can work with who's able to help you, who's able to give you feedback and help you spot mistakes on when it comes to your speaking. Now, as kind of a bonus tip, if you really can't find someone to work with yourself. And what I mean by this is you can record yourself speaking and you can listen back to it. And this can be really useful, especially if you're paying attention to one thing at a time. So for example, you might pay attention to only pronunciation, or you might pay attention to only vocabulary, but really focus on one thing and maybe take a bit of a gap between recording and listening back. You should be able to spot some mistakes that you made, and you should be able to correct those things for yourself. It can be a little scary to listen back to yourself, but it's a huge benefit. Even if you're also working with a teacher, it's something you should give a shot. So now you've heard my 4 tips. I want to know what you think is helpful for students who are preparing for the IELTS exam. So if you have a tip that you want to share with other students, I would love to see it. Just leave it down as a comment below. If you found this video useful, don't forget you can like and subscribe to this video, and that way you're far more likely to see our future videos. I've got another one about vocabulary coming out very soon. So make sure you like and subscribe. See you soon.